And that would be one Don Brown. DonBrownBooks.com. Author extraordinaire. Former U.S. Navy JAG officer. You had an office at the Pentagon, you were telling us just before you came on the air, that if you had been in that office, you would not be here speaking to us on because it was on 9/11. Your office got decimated. Former special assistant to U.S. Attorney Bill Braniff out in California. But you have really written some unbelievable books. The Last Fighter Pilot, Extortion 17.
One of my favorites.
Yep. Detained, and Travesty of Justice about Clint Lawrence, which President Trump did finally pardon. That was an awesome story there. And now your newest book, Kangaroo Court. So Don Brown, welcome back to Cowboy Logic.
The book, which you were kind enough to mention, Kangaroo Court, which is right here. I've got a chapter in here entitled J6 versus George Floyd. In other words, so we're looking at the treatment, the prosecutorial treatment of the J6 defendants versus George Floyd defendants. George Floyd riots were the costliest and among the most deadly riots in the history of the nation. Over $2 billion in damage. 95% of the George Floyd arrests were dismissed by Democrat prosecutors. And I say Democrat prosecutors because most of these riots took place in big blue cities. By absolute contrast, 95% of the J6 arrests are being prosecuted. So it's diametrically opposite. This is a political prosecution. The whole thing is politically motivated. It's politically motivated by the federal government to try to punish people for supporting a certain point of view, for punishing people for their association with President Trump. It's a heavy-handed, jackbooted approach, and I'm hoping the president is going to wipe the whole thing clean. And let's start over. Hey, if you're going to dismiss 95% of the George Floyd protesters, you ought to dismiss at least 95% of the J6 protesters, and even more if you ask me. So we got to start treating people equally. The Constitution requires it. And I didn't mean to step on a soapbox and preach a sermon, but you.
Hey, that's why we've got you on the show, man. This is soapbox time.
But here's what really is so annoying here, Don, is the fact that people are saying, well, now that Donald Trump is in, everything's going to change. We should have one rule of law. And all of a sudden, prosecutors have found religion. Judges, even in D.C., are saying, well, maybe we should cut back. Just because Trump got in, damn well if Kamala got in, they'd be full force right now, really even doing worse. And in fact, I don't know what the deal is with Merrick Garland, but quite honestly, he's still arresting people 4 years later.
The reason I wrote Kangaroo Court is because we have seen the eruption of these awful political prosecutions against President Trump in the last couple of years, and he's been brought before, in criminal trials in Florida, 2 in D.C., 1 in Manhattan. That's 4 altogether. Then there have been civil trials. There's Letitia James trying to take all of his property in Manhattan, and then you have in Colorado these idiot Democrats trying to keep him off the ballot under the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment, which SCOTUS shot that down. But it's been a full-throated assault. But in my book, I'm looking at this practice that Democrats have been bastardizing our courts, really for a period of about 30 years. For example, they prosecuted the governor of Texas, the former governor, Rick Perry, for vetoing a bill which he's allowed to do under the Texas Constitution, line item veto. They prosecuted former Senator Ted Stevens. They needed that seat. They got him out. He lost by like 3%. The case was thrown out for prosecutorial corruption within 6 months. One of the prosecutors committed suicide. They prosecute average Americans too. You look at, for example, these pro-life fathers like Mark Houck and Paul Vaughn, who were pro-life fathers advocating in favor of life and against abortion. And after Roe versus Wade gets overturned, Biden's DOJ prosecutes these guys 18 months after the fact, after local prosecutors declined to prosecute either one of them. They prosecuted Douglas Mackey, who was a cartoonist, who simply in 2016 lampooned Hillary Clinton voters as being dumb, and they are pretty dumb if you ask me. 5 years later, in 2021, the Biden DOJ prosecutes him. These are attack. These political prosecutions, Donna, are an attack on the United States Constitution on multiple fronts. These prosecutors are the criminals, okay? It should be an absolute crime to attack the United States Constitution. If you want to talk about subversion, if you want to talk about insurrection, when you use the legal system to attack the Constitution, attacking the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth, the Sixth, the 15th, the 19th, and the 26th. Those amendments are all attacked by these political prosecutions that we've seen. That should be a crime. And I've argued and will continue to advocate that we need rogue prosecutor law so that Jack Smith, Fannie Willis, Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, Kimberly Gardner, the woke, now missing in action prosecutor out in St. Louis, a Soros prosecutor who went after the McCloskeys for trying to defend their home, holding weapons. They ought to be subject. Their actions should be subject to review and subject to prosecution. And Congress should get serious about this and pass rogue prosecutor law. So on the backside, if any prosecutor is found to have brought a case, now here's the word, primarily for political reasons, that prosecutor ought to face a felony charge himself.